Hello and welcome to the Next Minute podcast, where love outlives loss. As always, I'm your host Sean, and we always cover topics of grief, anxiety, depression, mental health in general. Today's going to be a little bit different. I'm actually going to be talking about the kids' grief. I spoke about it on the Unparented podcast with Rob. That was heard a couple of weeks ago. I'll put the link in the comments. But it got me thinking, and I've sort of picked up and noticed a lot of things since then. I've paid more of an attention to it. And something happened tonight, which I use this as a medium to kind of help and support myself when things like this come up. And it was difficult to talk about, to be honest. But Elijah had a moment where I feel like he'd finally, processed it or let himself feel the emotions of losing his mum for the first time. Now, we've spoke about it loads before. I've had those conversations with him. I've dealt with different moments or episodes, whatever I want to phrase it as, where he struggled. But this was the first time he's proper just sobbed. Uncontrollably. And it started off quite small. I've mentioned it before, each night the kids will kind of swap who's got Taylor, who's got the rashes in their room. Cole's had her for probably a week or so. And I mentioned today, as I was going to bed, that Cole was taking the ashes back to Elijah's room, and then didn't really think anything of it. And then when I went into his room, say 5-10 minutes later, he asked me to go downstairs to get him a drink actually. So I nipped downstairs, fed the dogs, grabbed him a drink, came back up, and he said, "Make sure we have a dad cuddle tonight." Now, we always have a dad cuddle, but he never says "make sure." So that was kind of like my first hint that there was something going on. So I went in and spoke to him with the dad cuddle, and I could tell, in his voice, you can always tell there's something there, when somebody's about to cry or they've got something that they need to say. And he just kind of came out with it. He just said, "I'm really missing Mum." And then he just sort of wrapped his arms around me, and he just cried uncontrollably for best part of 5 minutes before he could even muster up the breath to speak, really. So I just held him tight, reminded him, that it's okay to cry. I'm there when he wants to talk, when he's able to get his breath. And just kept reassuring him until he could speak. And it was hard seeing him like that. And I've always felt that, I wondered whether they'd processed it, or, like I said earlier, let themselves feel it. And I think tonight was the first time where it's properly hit him. And in a weird way, I kind of felt like maybe it had, kind of been and gone in the sense of having that big moment, which was silly, really, because I always talk about how grief's just always there, and no matter when it hits and you feel it, it can always take you straight back to day one. And obviously with Elijah, he's had 5 years, going on 6 years now, where he's obviously lost his mum. But this, like I said, this was the first time in 5 years where he's properly just sobbed. He's really felt it. I've never seen him like that before, never. And it absolutely crushed me. We had a good chat. Like I said, we watched videos and looked at pictures and things. just did what we usually do, which always calms him down. And it worked again tonight. But we just had a really deep chat as we was going through the photos and videos. And we've got a video. I used to take Elijah upstairs in the morning. Taylor would usually text me when she's ready to get up and just say, "Polly, put the kettle on." So I pop the kettle on, make her a brew, and then I'd go on what I called a mum hunt with Elijah. So I'd pick him up, and we kind of walk around the house, going, "We're going on a mum hunt." And we'd kind of like walk around each room, singing that, and then each room we'd say, "Oh, is she in here?" I'd kind of like bob Elijah around, and he'd go, "Oh no." They'd move to like different rooms in the house, and eventually we'd find her in bed, and she'd kind of be hiding under the covers. And then as soon as like we started to count to three before she jumped out the covers, because we did it daily, so we always started like laughing and smiling, just anticipating her to jump out. And every morning he just laughed his head off, absolutely loved it, and I'd plop him on the bed and he'd just go sprinting over, or sprint crawling, and just give her a big cuddle. And one of those cuddles every morning where his head would just hit her, and it was a heavier head, and he'd just stay there. So I was looking at those videos, and he said something that kind of caught me off guard, which was because the videos are literally just me videoing Elijah's face, and then when they have the cuddle, it's obviously videoing them too. And he turned around to me and said, "Why didn't you video yourself, Dad? I wanted to see you as well." It just never clicked that that'd be something that he'd kind of ask or think about. It's certainly something I never thought about. For me, it was just always about those two. But yeah, that he ended up just sitting there for about an hour after that. We was looking through pictures and videos, and he always loves those ones, the mum hunts. And then when he kind of started to calm down, this was before we started looking at the picture actually, he just kind of held me and he looked at me and said, "I'm glad you didn't have to go through this when you was a kid." And I was like, where does that come from a 7-year-old, that he's thinking and he's considering, what I would have gone through if I'd have lost my mum at his age, and he's saying he wishes I never went through that, or he's glad that I never went through that. As much as it just floored me. I can't tell you what it felt like to hear him say that. One, it made me realise, but that shows how much, it's hurting him. That he's thinking about that other people aren't going through what he's had to go through, and he's happy about that. So that just, to me, just shows how much pain he's in those moments. But then, obviously, that he's thinking of me. Even when he's in so much pain, he's thinking of me, and he's glad that I didn't have to go through that pain of losing a parent. And I just it just blows me away the way he's compassion. And I've said it many times before, but at my lowest, when I was suicidal, I planned everything down to the T. And it was Elijah that saved me, It was him in the other room that kind of pulled me back through, changed my decision, and I was literally at the point where I was ready to do it. And I had the monitors up for some reason, and I heard or saw something on his camera, and to this day I don't know if I did or not, or whether I just convinced myself that I did. And then when I did, I was like, "What am I doing? I can't do this to them." But I'd gone down to the efforts of scheduling emails to be sent. I'd written letters and things like that ready to go out. Oh, but not ready to go out, but emails were scheduled ready to go out, and obviously I'd left letters for people to find, and I wish I still had them. I wish it was something I could read back on. The first thing I did was get rid of those. I wanted to get rid of like any evidence that I was even contemplating that. And at my point where I was at my lowest, where I felt like there was no escape, the only thing I thought that would help me was reaching out for help. But at the same time, I thought if I did, I would have the kids taken off me. Now, at that time when I was like in a pit of despair, really, my only thinking was, if I took my own life, they would have a full family with the plan I'd put together, and with who I wanted to go to and things like that. And I felt that that's what they deserved. They didn't deserve me. You know, they didn't deserve somebody who was struggling, who, you know, I could look after them, but I wasn't looking after myself. I just felt like I was failing. So my way of thinking was, if I took my own life, it would better them. Obviously, 5 years on from, well, 4.5 years on from that, and I know that would have been the complete wrong decision. Especially hearing him say that tonight, and that was one of the first things that went through my head when he said it was, if I'd have taken my own life, he would have gone through that same pain twice. And how can I put him through that? Or I could have considered putting him through that. So hearing him say it, it was just a mix of, you know, intense emotions. But within, you know, after he processed it, we were laughing again. You know, we've got, it's easy with Elijah because I know, to be fair, it's easy with them both. I know what works for them. Or if that thing won't work that night, I know something else that might work, and there's usually something in our routine that, you know, that helps them both. And that was it tonight. We kind of went through, obviously, the pictures and videos that always help, and then we started talking about memories and, you know, things that kind of fed into it. And then one thing that Tilly used to always do, which I've always told Elijah, she used to like just stroke his nose like that, just run a finger down his nose, just slowly, and he'd usually drift off to sleep. Obviously she did it when he was a baby, but she'd always done it from him being a baby to 2 years old. And I do that to him every now and then, and always remind him that, you know, it's what his mum used to do, and did it tonight. When he was kind of coming round, he was still crying, you know, still really emotional. And the other thing that she used to do was, if she was doing that and he wasn't sleepy, she'd kind of do that. So she'd stroke from between his eyes, down his nose, and then she'd go, just tap a finger on the tip of his nose and just go beep up on your nose, and he'd just kill himself laughing. And obviously, like I said, this was between him being a baby and 2 years old, and I did it to him tonight, and I think it just caught him off guard, but he just burst out laughing, and it was like he was a kid, like a baby all over again. No worries, and he just how it changed from him just being in tears to laughing. It was all things his mum used to do, you know, stroking his nose to calm him down, and bopping him on the nose to make him laugh. You know, and I've always said, like, I don't know how I'd cope without her, but it's things like that that remind me that she's still here. You know, she's always here. You know, she's still guiding me. She's still there for the kids. And you know, I'm doing it. You know, they're struggling, but I'm doing what I need to, you know, get them back on track. I suppose that's part of being the mum and dad thing. I've always said I don't think one person can be mum and dad. They can, they've got the best intentions, and I don't think I'll ever be, be able to do both sides. I can do elements of it, but I don't have that instinct that she had. But obviously from the time I had with her, I've picked up a lot from her, and that just those little things, just obviously make a big difference, and it showed it tonight. And I don't know why it came into my head as a thing to do, just to pop him on the nose in that moment, but it just seemed like it ended up being exactly what he needed. And it was really fitting that obviously it was something that Taylor used to do, so it all just kind of fell into place tonight. So really, obviously a really emotional moment, but we got through it. I told him how much he helped me, reminded him of that, reminded him, his mum would be proud of him. And we spoke about it being the first time he's really felt it and, properly processed it. And he agreed as well. He said it's the first time he feels like he's really, really cried. And it's that, like I said before, it's that sobbing where you can't really catch your breath. You're crying and you can't stop. You've got no control over it. But like I said, it was just, I don't know how we got to laughing. But we did what we needed to, and like I said, I left him. He just asked for a bit of alone time, just looking through pictures and videos of him and Taylor. So I left him to that, and then he shared to me when he was ready. I had another cuddle and a laugh, and then he was off to sleep. So it's it's really, really what feel like impossible moments, but we get through them somehow. And then on the flip side, so this is kind of where, or why I wanted to do a training course I've recently started, which is children and young people's mental health. Because I want to kind of understand what they're both going through. Obviously, Elijah lost Taylor at 2 years old. Koa lost his mum at 12 hours old. So their, obviously, experiences are going to be very different in terms of their grief and how they process it, what emotions they feel, and how they look back on that time. And obviously, like I said, seeing Elijah today in that way was the first time I've seen him ever be in that state. Like I said, this is 5 years on, and I know one of the things that they said was kids really start to process grief and loss from around 4 years old. I don't know how true that is, but from my experience with Elijah and Koa, that's roughly around the time that they did start to really question things, start asking more about what happened and understanding the situation really and what happened to the mum. So I can kind of see why they would. I think Cole was probably just under 4, but due to turn 4 soon. I think Elijah was bang on 4, so it's fairly accurate. But yeah, I really want to sort of get in and understand that side of things. Cole's been a little different. He's an emotional kid. I think they both are, to be fair, but Cole seems to choose anger more than anything else. So like I said, we've got different things in place with Cole. So if he gets to that state, we've got the punch bag. We've got sometimes I'll just let him go to the front door and he'll just scream if he needs to. Just do what he needs to. But I've kind of got a handle on it. I'll let him do what he needs to within reason, to get his anger out, as long as he's not hurting anyone. But we had an incident at school on Friday where the teacher asked me to stop and she tried to talk to me about his behaviour in school. Which, to be fair, he's in year 1 now, so it's probably come a year later than expected with Goa. But yeah, it was nothing new. He'd hit a kid, I think, and a few other things, but it was stuff we'd seen before, and I'd asked if he'd been doing it in school before. They said yeah, but I think today was just, or that day was just a bad day, and he'd done a few things, and I kind of said to him, well, if I get told sooner, when it's just 1 or 2 instances a day or a week, whatever it may be, I can work with them. I'll work with Cora as well at home, try to, understand what's going on, because if I don't get told what's going on at school, all I see is how he is with me and his brother. So it was, yeah, I understand, obviously, they're not going to report everything if it's just a minor thing, but yeah. But somebody did mention, it was a few weeks ago actually, but they mentioned whether some of his behaviour might be linked to trauma as well. Obviously he's lost his mum at 12 hours old, but that trauma was still there, and I've never really thought of it that way before. In terms of, obviously, he was 12 hours old, but growing up without his mum, that's the trauma in itself, not the actual event of a death, but growing up without a mum, that's probably the trauma. That is the trauma. So he still obviously had to process everything, still had to cope with just having one parent, seeing me struggle, seeing his brother struggle as well. Maybe because Elijah was a little bit older, processed things sooner. Maybe he's seen moments where I've given maybe Elijah more attention because he's needed it. Now, whether Cole's processed that and thought he's getting more attention, so if I, scream or punch something or hit someone, then I'll get the attention back. There might be some of that in there, but I obviously don't know. But yeah, that was my motivation to sign up to this Children and Young People's Mental Health course, to better understand what they're going through. If I can support them better, then obviously more than worth doing the course, more than worth the time doing it. But yeah, very different approaches for the two of them. Don't get me wrong, Cole's not a bad kid. He has his moments, but he's also like one of the most loving kids as well. Every night he'll shout for a family cuddle, so we'll all go into his room. Like I said, they always swap who's got Taylor each night, and he's always one of the ones who's kind of like, well, it's your turn, and he's really like loving about it. But yeah, just very different approaches. And I know what works for Elijah won't necessarily work for Koa. Obviously can't sit there and look at pictures and videos with Koa. We've probably got 5 or 6 pictures with Koa and his mum. Sometimes he'll ask to watch videos of Taylor and Elijah, but sometimes I think that triggers like a bit of jealousy as well. So I don't always use that one. But I just try and see, how he's coping with it, and see what works for him and what might fit best in that moment for him. That's probably one of the biggest challenges with supporting the kids with the grief is figuring out what works for them and what doesn't, and it's an ongoing thing. They're still growing, they're still developing. So what works for them is changing constantly. So it's just a matter of adapting. And one thing I do now, I've been doing for a little while, is speak to them. Find out what they think works for them. Find out what they need. How do they want to process it? It's not just about me guessing and just saying, "Oh, I'll do this." A lot of the time, 90% of the time is speaking to them, find out what they want, what they need, doing what I can to, meet that, and then just supporting them as best I can through it. But it is, like I said, just constantly changing. I'm going to do more research, more training on it, see how I can better help the kids, and maybe in future how I can help others as well. But I'm going to leave this episode there, because that it's been a heavy night, obviously, with Elijah doing that. Well, we've obviously going through that with Elijah. Been very heavy, but I think it was needed as well. And I made sure he knew that. Him crying like that was fine. We need to do that sometimes. There were things as well he said which crushed me. I've talked about it before in here, about feeling it in your chest. That grief where it just kind of sits on you. And he was talking about that when I was holding him before, and he said he feels like a piece of his heart's missing. And I just said to him, I said, I feel exactly the same. And I said, but the way I like to think of it is, the piece of the heart that he's missing is obviously with his mum. And I said, when you feel that ache, that weight on your chest, just think of it as your mum giving that piece of heart that she's got of yours a hug. And that's why you can feel it. That's why you can feel it so heavy, is because she's holding you so tight. She's holding that piece of your heart so tight wherever she is. And that's how I like to think of it. And he took that on board, and I could see it helping him. But again, I've no idea where that came from. Sometimes stuff just comes out of my mouth, and I have no idea why, but it just seems to work sometimes. And I think that's part of parenting. Sometimes it's just winging it. But yeah, it ended up being, like I said, really difficult, really heavy night, but very much needed for him, I think. I could tell he felt better after. So yeah, I'm absolutely proud of him and the way he's processed it and handled it. Not just tonight, but the last 5 years. So yeah, we'll leave it there. We do have some guests lined up. I've been saying it for a few weeks now. Part of it has just been understanding how to edit on this software. There was a little issue on the last episode where I just seemed to start a sentence part way through. And that was I think it's the AI in the software that picks up where I'm using filler words like and it kind of cuts those out. But then when it clips that segment, it kind of misses off the start of the next word, so then it just jumps straight into that next sentence. So hopefully I'll be able to figure that out when I post this. But yeah, I've got quite a few guests lined up. Really excited to get those involved. I just wanted to make sure I got my head around the software first. But more importantly, I wanted to make sure I did it respectfully. We're going to be talking about, obviously, people they've lost, their loved ones. So I want to make sure before I go into doing it that they understand what it's about, and I understand from them what they're looking to get from it as well. So that's why it's taking a little bit longer. But we do have some people lined up. I'm really excited to get those recorded. And more importantly, just hear about the loved ones and their stories. Like I said, that's how we keep people alive. I can't remember who said it, but they said you die twice. You die when your physical body is gone, and then you die again when somebody says your name for the last time. So by talking about our loved ones, always remembering them, they'll never die, and that's the way I like to think of it. So we'll get them up, and we'll get the episodes recorded. and then we'll get them scheduled in. I will be doing some episodes soon, talking about some services that have helped me. Obviously Andy's Man Club being a big one, but we've got Winston's Wish, which I use to as a resource to help me with having those conversations with the kids. Papyrus is another one, that's a local charity in Warrington. Had some conversations with them as well. So they're a prevention of suicide for young people and young adults. So I think it's between ages 4 to 35, I think. They do amazing work. They've got a hope line that's 24/7. And again, I've used those for some conversations. They've got some brilliant resources. So yeah, my plan is to do some episodes focusing on those. If we can get some guests in from those charities and those organisations, then brilliant. But if not, I'll sort of talk about my experience with them, how I utilise them, and what services they offer as well. So I think that's pretty much it for this episode. As always, if you could give me a follow, like, subscribe, and if you do notice any issues with the quality recording since I moved to new software, just let me know. Just leave a comment or drop me a message, and I'll pick up on it. Other than that, thank you very much as always for listening to me drone on. This, like I said, is a tool I now use to helps me get stuff off my chest. Leaves me a little bit lighter when I've finished these. And that's more or less it for this episode. So thanks again. You can obviously follow on Facebook, which is The Next Minute. And we've got Instagram, Next Minute Podcast. Spotify, Podbean, we're on YouTube now, which is where the videos will be uploaded to. If you do notice anything, like I said, please just get in touch, let me know, and I can adjust those. But thank you very much, and as always, remember, you can get through the next minute.